Right, guys. So I guess we will start things now. So yeah, first off, hi everyone, and thanks for joining our virtual meetup this evening. We are incredibly grateful to be joined by Damien Seguy, the CTO of Exicat, who will be walking us through his analysis, thoughts, and exploring the future of PHP 8.3 with us this evening. Just want to make everyone aware that this will be a recorded session for those who cannot attend this evening. Just to double check, everyone can hear me. Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. So, yeah, just a bit of an introduction from us here at IO Associates. So myself and my colleague Connor are part of IO Associates, who are a technology, engineering and defence specialist recruitment agencies, where we work with businesses across the UK and EU. My name's Melanie, and I focus on placing PHP professionals into scaling businesses on a permanent basis. I'll pass you over to my colleague Connor, who will do an introduction himself and talk you through questions throughout this session.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name's Connor, and I work with Melanie at IO Associates. I head up the contract side of the PHP market here. So anything from PHP within its specific frameworks. That's kind of my side of things. Just a few bits about the meeting this evening, question-wise. Any questions that come through, I'll pick, sort of random questions per slide, just to sort of keep the meeting flowing and moving. But all questions will be emailed to Damien at the end of the meeting, so he can come back to you either via email or, however you want to have that discussion afterwards. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me, and I think it's time to pass over to Damien.
Yes. Am I on? How people can hear me? Yes. Yeah, I get a first one. Otherwise, I'm going to yell at the screen for an hour. That's pretty inconvenient. So welcome aboard. I'm very happy. I guess you're just as excited as the bunch of elephants I have here that are going to get ready for tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that you elephants also are sensing that there is a new PHP version that's coming tomorrow. I'm going to be very happy to do that, although not for the same reason possibly than you, because well, PHP 8.3 is literally tomorrow. We're going to celebrate that in a moment. And of course, as soon as we switch to PHP 8.3, I will switch to PHP 8.4. The reason being that I'm working actually on static analysis, for those of you who haven't had the bad luck to run into me somewhere in the world. And so I do have to be ready for next version, and that will be tomorrow. So tomorrow you switch to 8.3, I switch to 8.4, and we immediately start together our new journey with new PHP versions. The important here is that I have had the experience of working with this new version for over a year now, and that's what I'm going to share tonight with you. So I will be also, I have the experience of working with PHP 8.3 on a static analysis point of view. So I automate my own reviewing of the code, auditing of the code. And of course, it has to be ready when the new version shows up. So that's why I need to be a little bit in advance. As you have also seen, I'm happy house of elephants at home. Now, code-wise, the important here is that we're going to look at the impact that PHP 8.3 has on our code in general. Of course, we're going to review new features because that's always something people want to know. You want to know what's new, what's going to be exciting and better to use than previously. But I tend to think that that might not happen immediately. So we're also going to take a look at this new version from the impact it has on our code, which means that we'll have both incompatibilities, because yeah, of course, before you start using 8.3, you'll have to get ready with anything that is not compatible with the current versions. There's a few of them, but not that many. And also otherwise, new version, new features, suggestions. So modernization, things that you could do in different way now, and that's going to save you time and maybe save you a little bit of space on the code. So now for the agenda itself, we'll go into details with PHP 8.3. It's a very classic PHP 8 version, so it's going to go a little bit everywhere. That's why I've tasked my sidekick here to collect the questions along the way during the presentation. So put them in the chat. I will answer them on the spot so that we don't have to track back a few slides later. And then otherwise, if it's a little bit too long, then I'll take time afterwards to delve into more details. I have also added those little icons along the way on the slides. So if you don't hear me mentioning it, there are some of the features which are backward incompatible. So once you decide to use it, you are now on 8.3 and you cannot go back on previous versions. So maybe those are features you do not want to jump into immediately, in particular if you want to keep backward compatibility. The other icon is to mention that this feature, however incompatible or suggestion is friendly for static analysis. So we are able to suggest it, spot it as a pattern in the code, and then you can decide what you want to do with it, either fix it or keep it for later. Otherwise, there will be two main sections in this presentation. First one will be about new features, and the second one is about change behaviors. I'm pretty sure you're going to be very happy to learn that sometimes the code does not change, but the behavior behind change. And sadly, there's a few of them here. We do not have anything that is a removed feature. No fear about that. I guess at that stage it will happen in 8.9. Sorry, on PHP 9. So we don't have that many. And that's going to be a light version to move to. Now a little bit about the process itself. The first release master has been Rasmus. That was about 28 years ago. So yes, we're starting to have a pretty sizable history in PHP. The other detail about choosing this evening, of course, for presenting PHP 8.3, beside the fact that actually PHP 8.3 is tomorrow, is that today is Rasmus' birthday. And without him, we wouldn't be there. So we just, pay a little tribute to him. And thank you, Rasmus. I'm pretty sure Rasmus is not there. I'm going to check on the list, but he never attends my presentation, so I'm not going to wait for him. The other ones that are also less known as grunts that are doing most of the work are the release masters. Every PHP version has 3 release masters who are responsible for collecting all the features that have to go into a specific PHP version, and tomorrow deliver it. So on my side, I have an excited elephant. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a pretty short night just collecting the last minute bugs that people are trying to show there. And you have to make a little thank for them, because they are not part of the PHP Foundation. They're part of the PHP community as a group. PHP Foundation is currently making work 6 developers, but they're not here. Of course, the release masters are collecting the work from those developers, but they're not themselves doing everything. They're just packaging it and releasing for tomorrow. In the same time, if you are already part of the PHP Foundation, if you are not already part of the foundation, it's important to go there on a regular basis and provide them with funds. The foundation is currently collecting those funds to hire developers and fix the bugs that go into the release master in the release. So that's giving work to the release master. think about it, and if you don't do it yourself, also you can suggest that your company, provide funds, because they're probably providing, using features from PHP, and that's coming from there. Now, the RIS Masters is a very tightly grouped. The election is in April. If you're interested to join that very short group of people, they've been there because it requires C knowledge. But there's one veteran, and there's then two newbies, I guess, and there's also a release timeline. So it starts basically all year round with RFCs, request for comments. Anytime we want to add a new feature, change anything, it has to be explained, detailed. In particular, recently I've been emphasizing on the impact. So whatever is changed has to be checked, and is not supposed to wreak havoc in the whole code base. So there's a impact being there. To be honest, and that's also why I'm going to switch to 8.4 tomorrow. RFC, there's already 4 RFCs for 8.4 that has been coded and merged into the master, the main branch of PHP. So PHP 8.3 and 8.4 are already very different. Traditionally, we collect those RFCs until June. Strangely enough, this year it was June 8th. I don't know if they wanted to celebrate PHP birthday, but the official birthday of PHP is on June 8th, 1995. And I would say the most important one is the feature freeze by the middle of July, depending on how much drama there is around them. But that's where we decide how much features are going to be inside PHP. That's why we do have a kind of difference at the moment, like 6 months later, between PHP 3 and 4. And then, of course, the most important is the general availability, which is tomorrow. So without further ado, let's take a look at the new features. The first new feature, which might come as a surprise, is type constants. So that means that starting with PHP 8.3, we can type a constant, a class constant. This does not work for global constants. It only works with class constants. And you add that after the visibility part. So as I show here, this is a string, and we have a value, which means that at that point, basically everything can be typed inside a class. We add the properties, we add the methods, both in their parameter and their return type, and now we have the class. So that makes it complete. This is one part of the missions of the developers of PHP, to make the features as harmonious and homogeneous as possible. And definitely constants were missing the type. It does feel, though, a little bit strange to have type for something whose value we know, but actually there's a use case for that, in particular by the fact that constants are not can be overwritten, and they can be changed. Of course, they cannot be changed inside the class itself. So once it's the value is set, then the value is there. But if you go and have class inheritance, then you can actually overwrite one constant with another value, and then with another value, then you can actually end up with a different type of value. And then later, given that PHP is getting more and more strict about showing one type or another inside the native functions, or any other methods actually, then you might end up having a problem, because it's not easy to convert these constants to another type. So nowadays, the idea is that once we add the type to a constant, then any subclass will also have to at least use the same type. This is good for static analysis. There's a good number of analyses for which we do not really care about the value itself. That's definitely another realm of static analysis. But at least we can check the type. And once we have the type, then we can actually infer if we can give that to a property or to a parameter. So that's good. The other less known cases is that constants may make usage of what we call static constant expressions, which mean that as long as you're using a specific set of operators and only constants, literals and other constants, constant class or global, then you are able to make an expression as the value. So in this example, you don't really know which type would be for that constant. It could be null or it could be a string, depending on PHP OS, which will be depending again on where the application is running. So type constant here will again save the day by making sure that we actually have only one type of value that is being used and not multiple type. So that's one. And actually, to finish thinking about that, type constant might actually just end up with things as simple as that, which is where the constant itself is built on top of another constant, which means that basically you're delegating the power and the value to the right to give a value to something else. And maybe that something else will not be good for you and can mess up with your code. So in the end, yeah, type constant is probably better to tighten your code. Don't jump on that immediately because that's going to be backward incompatible. And also, as usual, you don't have to use it. You can start simply with ignoring it, and just like we did for properties and parameters, that may take time before we adopt them in the code. Now, since we are there and we're talking about class constant, there is a new syntax for variable class constant. I don't know if dynamic wouldn't be a better word for variable, but I just enjoy having this play on words with variable constant. This is when you want to, when you have the name of the constant that you would like to call, but it is stored as a string, probably inside a variable, but you want to access that. So you know the name, but you cannot outcode it as usual. Until now, there was a function which is also called constant that allows you to get that constant. That's the example you have at the bottom of the screen. And that still exists. It's not very well known, nor very common to use, but that was there. And usually people would put everything in there. So when you use constant, you need to use the full namespace before reaching it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And otherwise, you could actually also access a class constant that way by putting the double column operator in the name of the class. So nowadays, it will be replaced by something a lot more, I would say, readable, which is just curly brackets around the name of the function of the constant. So you see that in the middle of the example, $x double column, that's classical. And then the curly braces, and then the value itself here, the name of the constant is stored in the variable C. I tried to play with that. You can make it also using the class operator. So X plus the class operator, that gives you a string, which is actually the full path to the class. And then you can use again a second operator double column. That makes a longer expression, but that still works, of course. That's interesting to know in terms of syntax. At that point, I can give you a little bit of a headache by looking at this marvelous piece of code, which is a collection of variations of all the possible dynamic calls you could do around constants and properties. Now, I left over every actual definition, and I let you just imagine the different possibilities you have there. The three first ones are actually class constants with this new syntax. The first one is the classic one, hard-coded. The second one will mean that you want to access a class constant whose name is inside the global constant A, and that class constant will be in the class A. So that's exactly what was introduced right now, just like the next one. And this time, the name of the constant is inside a variable. So the three first ones are dedicated to this new version, this new syntax. Starting with the fourth one, we have the same kind of syntax, but dedicated to properties, and that's already valid. So if you need to access dynamically a static property, you now have to use the dollar first. So you have to switch the dollar and the curly brace, and now that's a property. And you have the same variation. The first one has the name of the property as a constant. The second one has the name of the property as variables. And then after that, it was mostly, play on words. The only one that is actually wrong and does not exist is the last one. And the last one, which is a classic problem as I discovered this afternoon, You cannot access a string with the curly braces anymore as an array syntax. Okay, so probably the last one would be better if the most inner curly braces were actually square brackets. But otherwise, the rest all exists. It might require that you have a bunch of definitions available, but that's all possible. Actually, just to make it less hard on your brain, here are the summary of all the previous and currently existing dynamic access. You can access constants and properties methods in the same way. One curly braces for constants, dollar curly braces is for properties. And if you put parentheses at the end, then you end up with the method call. The only special case is, of course, constants cannot be called with the object operator, so we still have to use the double colon. But this one is pretty obvious. At least you see now it's actually constant. It's spread across the syntax, and everything is at least easy to guess, and you don't have to rely on a constant function call. Inception. Okay, now let's do something a little bit simpler, and actually something that's going to be backward compatible, which is nice for once, which is the override attribute. So attributes. Ever since PHP 8, we have those this new syntax that you see in the middle, override with square brackets and a pound, and this one is native PHP attribute that mentions that the current method is supposed to override another method in the parent. So here we have foo that's inside the class Y. And indeed, when we go up and we look at the parent class X, there's also another method foo. So basically, we are explicitly telling that this method is supposed to be overwriting another method above. And if someone decides to update the parent class and suddenly this method does not exist anymore, then the second one is going to be an orphan. And basically, it should have followed. Either it would be removed, like the method is not there anymore, or it should be also renamed and keep override something else. Which means that at linting time, PHP will be able to detect that something is missing and then help you, detect that there is a parent that's not doing something. This is basically the contrary to checking for abstract. Okay, if you add abstract on the foo method in the parent, it means that every single class in children class must also override this function, at least define it. Here, it's a bit the contrary. It's the children that says, "Hey, look, I definitely need to override something," and then you have to provide me a function. The defining function might be anywhere in the parent, so it could be in a directory, the parent, or the parent of the grandparent, and in everywhere. That goes as far as you can. It's also recommended by the RFC that you put override everywhere that you need it, but it might be a little bit too many. I did a quick check on various code bases. And for example, if you take a look at Composer, there's 2,300 methods roughly, and they have 1,200 different names. Basically, and that's an estimation, there's like 40% of the methods that will require basically an override attribute. That's probably going to be a lot of work just to put something that is currently being checked by the fact that, you just run it and it works, or maybe unit tests are saving your day by making sure that everything is running fine. That actually ratio can go much further on Exacat, which is also heavily relying on an abstract class that has to override a lot of methods. Then I'm up to 76%. So probably I'm not going to tag everything with it. Besides, I have my own check, so that's another one. But that might be interesting for new codes, and we'll see how it's spread in the code. The interesting part of this feature is that you can actually start putting it in the code right now, because static analysis will be able to check your PHP 8.2 and older code with the same system. We do not have to rely on PHP 8.3. PHP 8.3 is going to help, definitely. So this kind of checks will not happen anymore once we move to 8.3. But until 8.3, you can rely on static analysis to do that and help you. So you can start using that feature, and that's immediately a good thing for everyone. Again, as a little experiment or as a little reminder, I can still fit the list of native PHP attributes. So here they are. We now have one attribute that is dedicated, I would say, to conception checks, because this is obviously something that is free, but that is decided at the coding moment. There is another one for security, which will hide values of parameters instead of debugging them live. And we have two others that are related to PHP evolutions. Whenever PHP is trying to be a bit more strict, but we want to be able to be explicit and shut down that kind of features, that's there. And if you like attributes, I would suggest you take a look at Dave Lidament's language extension, which has collected, I would say, half a dozen of interesting new attributes, which he's trying to promote, and that will bring some new features. No time to check there, but you don't have to rely on PHP to do those kind of checks with attributes. It's actually very open to everyone, and then you can just give them a value, a name, and then that should be something we can check in the code. Let's move on. As I said, we'll have to switch quite often, but we're staying in classes, and we're now checking the read-only parts of the classes. Those are read-only with a new keyword. I think it was introduced in 8.2, but I do have to say I suddenly have a blank on this one. Read-only makes a property written once. Okay. I have to admit I'm a little bit at hard with the name itself, but at least the property is written once, and then once it's written, then it's not going to be changed anymore, which is good. This is something useful in different situations. If you want to work on immutability, definitely helps. Now, there was a hole in the racket by the fact that the clone function would not allow any update. And that's what I've presented in the code on the side. Basically, if you set in 8.2, if you set the property at constructor time, but then you clone it, then the clone itself is acting a little bit like a new constructor. That's the moment where you should be able to do a little bit of change. Of course, you're cloning, so you're supposed to keep elements as identical as possible. But also you may have at least to change a reference to another object in case of composition, for example. You may also use it to just static counter or just different IDs, things like that. So clone definitely has a very special place in this arrangement, and that has been fixed in PHP 8.3. So now in clone, you can again rewrite a new time this property, which definitely makes you think about what the clone function is. And I think it's a little bit, that's the pun I have of a Schrodinger method, because most of the time in the method, the this is representing the current object, except in clone, because in clone, the this is still representing the same object of the class, but it's a copy of the previous object. In fact, and you can try that at home, if you use clone on a read-only property in 8.3, that will be working as expected. No check on you can rewrite the property, but if you call the method directly, then it's not a clone, it's just a call of another property, and PHP 8.3 is going to yell at you that you cannot update it. So that's an interesting thing. It's also a reminder that you should not call PHP specific and magic methods directly. You should probably just use them in their current specific setup. Now, we switch from classes to variables. One of them is static variables. First thing, everyone is used to static variables, because I was surprised to see that the percentage of usage of static variables is almost 30%. It's 27 as I checked this afternoon. So everyone is using those apparently. I do see them as some kind of a downgraded version of a property. So it might be useful in specific cases when you want to be fast and code fast, but I would say since we're doing things in classes everywhere nowadays, probably not critical. Anyway, this one is a very common usage feature. And when we define the static, you give it a name, of course, and then you don't have to, but you can give it a default value. And until 8.3, those default value used to be static expressions. So if you remember when I was mentioning initially that you could define a constant with a small expression, at least an expression with limited features, that used to be the case here. But when you think about it, static variable, well, it's a variable, right? So why not be able to access other variables, because it will be, changeable, or it could be updated later. And then at that point, well, we can also use other variables or other functions, because again, we are in an execution phase, not in the definition phase of PHP. So nowadays, that limitation has been lifted, and inside a static definition, as you can see on the code, then you can put function calls, other expressions, as long as you keep it, simple like that. The evolution from the current situation, and that's why static analysis might help you, is that if you need to do something that complex and that has not been allowed so far, what would you do? You probably have to give the default value, let's say null, or something that is recognizable. And then inside the function, you're going to make another check saying, oh, if A is this default value, then I know that I have to do this update, and I will call something else. So so this particular modernization is detectable by a static analysis, and you'll be able to upgrade the code and reduce it, make it more readable that way. The only thing I see for this one is that it looks like we now are allowed to use functions inside a constant expression. That is still not the case. Functions are not allowed inside constants, because this is a different phase of PHP code where variables are not allowed. So that's not going to happen. We have that for static. I guess globals could get the same treatment, and I haven't seen that yet. But global initialization is definitely another problem. And otherwise, we just have this new strange syntax, which might actually surprise you in the code. Now, this is probably for, I don't know how many of you, but like none of us. Up to now, final was not a name that we could use for an alias inside a trait. That's really very specific. But when I was saying that PHP is trying to make everything homogeneous, for some reason, final was not allowed when you use a trait and you want to rename one of its methods. And that's the only word that was not possible. That was spotted. I think that was Nicolas Grekas from Symfony who spotted that. And now that's valid. So as a reminder, all PHP keywords can be used as method names or property names inside a class. And here, this is the case. This is going to be a method name, so that should be possible. And now that's one quirk less possible. Another one that probably is not going to bother you too much, anonymous read-only classes are now available. That was okay for properties inside an anonymous class, but the class as a whole has was not allowed. Again, this is now fixed. You can put the same read-only with a class and then create that directly. There's also another improvement that has been done, which is that if you try to use abstract or final with a read-only with an anonymous class, then this is now still not allowed, because it's kind of pointless, right? Anonymous classes cannot be extended. They cannot be final because they are final by default. So those options are completely forbidden, but at least you get a message that makes sense, and that's not strange garbage like before. So again, a little bit of improvement. More interesting, I think, although a little bit limited to my taste, is the fact that we can lint more than one file nowadays with PHP 8.3. I've never understood that ever since the beginning. Linting is, very simple process. You go in command line, you put the name of the file, you use the -L option, and PHP tells you if this is interesting to compile. Very important, if you have any code base, use that with your current version, but also, all the upcoming versions. And if you want to ensure backward compatibility, of course, with the older version. On the other hand, here, you don't have to put a full list of files. You just, use stars and it works. I have to admit, first, it's a single-threaded check. So if you have like 10,000 files to process, that's just going to use one of your CPUs. At the moment, there is at least several packages, but there's parallel PHP that allows you to use all the processors in your machine, and that will process all of them in parallel. So that's still much better. Otherwise, here you have to understand that the stars will look for many files, but that might also skip a few ones. So I say it's better, but we're still a way to go. Next one, JSON validate. I've heard lots of people very happy to hear about this one. Again, I'm less thrilled by it, but it's nice to see. There's a dedicated version dedicated version function, to check if JSON is valid. So you give it, unlike the example, by the way, you give it the text, and then JSON validate will just check if the JSON can be decoded, which is nice. It's also slightly faster. I used it on large JSON files, and I usually take less than 30%. No, it shaves off 30% of the time, because probably there's no data creation. So just like check if it could be parsed.
Damien,
Yes.
sorry, I've got a question from Lewis. Lewis, would you like me to ask the question now, or you're free to ask the question if you would like?
Okay, I see the questions. I can, that was a little bit before, but I guess we can make a quick stop. If you want to participate in the development of PHP itself, the most important is grab yourself. I'm going to go back because I had the link there. The place is, no, that was not there. That was before, no. Oh, yeah, that's the wiki that I've put on that slide. So the RFC, request for comments, they are all year round. So you can go there if you have a PHP account. You can also vote for it. There's usually a corpus of 60 people who are voting for them, depending on the interest that they have in a specific subject. But you can read that those RFCs that are all available there, and then at least comment or reach out to the author to help one way or another. And then after that, you're probably going to learn and meet other people, and then they will probably help you to go further than that. So I would say, the wiki.php is the good start. You should start with. Yeah, cloning, static, CLI. So JSON validate. So JSON validate, it's a little bit faster, but it also does not create anything for you. So at the moment, what we do is like we just JSON decode, and if anything happens, then we just catch the exception, I guess, or you can also check if there is an error that happened. And then, you're good to go. I don't think it's really useful to validate first and then decode, because if you do both of them at the same moment, you're basically going to waste 70% of your time more. Okay, at that point, if you're used to decode and immediately use the data, probably better to just wait for the error and do it. On the other hand, of course, it's an important step, because there are situations where you want to validate first, but not necessarily decode. And I would say that's an important situation, in particular when you have modern frameworks, which tend to split or at least put some distance between the moment you do different operation. So if you're in a very short script, well, JSON decode and then catch the exceptions is probably sufficient. And doing the validate doesn't really bring you anything except maybe a little slower. On the other hand, if you have at one point, let's say, the controller that just want to check if the string is at least a reasonable JSON, but also that wants to not know the business model and decide to wait for later to do the decode and then the processing at the same time, then now that makes sense. You can use JSON validate, do that faster, and then push that to the decode later, if that's needed, because of course you can also do some lazy loading. I could imagine that this is going to open the door to different things, but that's pretty much ingrained into planning and pre-doing things. Depending on the framework, you might end up doing those JSON validate several times. I can imagine like the controller do a first one, and then it gives that to the messaging framework, and then the messaging framework is going to do that again, and then until actually the entity does the work. But I guess at that point, there's no way you can do anything about it. That's going to be beyond our realm. Yeah, so just the validate debate, I've seen the error. So no, JSON validate is supposed to take the string, but yeah, I forgot to put it there. So it does take an argument. There. And then we're getting close to the end for this new feature part. PHP 8.3 is adding 82 new constants. Which is a lot. The usual culprits are there. Curl is adding a lot of them. Postgres is adding a lot of them, and POSIX are adding a lot of them. I'm not going to read them aloud to you because that's going to be a waste. Function-wise, we've already seen at least JSON validate. But again, Postgres is adding a lot of specific features for the database. So take a look. We're going to see also two other functions in a moment. And there's also a good set of 12 classes. Again, that looks like a lot. We've seen one of them, which is override. And we've also, datetime is adding probably the 11th others, because datetime used to throw exceptions all the time. And by exception, I mean the exception class, not a refined version. And then it introduced with this version a lot of new exceptions. So with names, depending if the problem is a question of format, of out of range, or is it an interval problem. So you will be able to use that and be more precise in catch the exact exceptions you are expecting. Last one, because it's always interesting to see what we have there. PHP 8.3 is introducing 38 new error messages, and it's retiring 11 of them. And I always like to take a look at the evolution of PHP error messages, which over the years is in that graph. We have currently 300 when we were in PHP 5, and now in 8.3 we are well beyond 700. You can see actually the evolution there. First, this major jump in PHP 5.3, but this trend of adding them within a PHP major version, so between 5.0 and 5.6, between 7.0 and 7.4, you see that it's going up, because as we are inside a major version, there are all those deprecations that are being added all the time to make sure that we get ready for the next version. And when we reach the major version, then all those deprecations, boom, get removed. And now it's just a simple fatal error or something like that. And the process starts again. So as you can see, we are still very low in terms of compared to PHP 7. So hopefully we have less deprecation to handle, but we're still going up. And hopefully when we reach 9, it's going to be a lot better than that. So yeah, I see no generics yet. No, there's no generic yet, and actually, there are big chances that it's not going to happen. You probably should go and complain to your static analyzers to be able to handle that in a better way than we have at the moment. Finally, and that's something I did to PHP. It's yielding less results now. I checked if there are any changes in the types that are being used or in the presence of parameters. One of the function, str or chr, this is a mouthful to pronounce, is getting a new parameter just because the other functions of the same family, str 1R CHR, for example, add a before needle parameter. So at least, again, the two methods together are consistent. And range has been upgraded from accepting strings to mixed for both start and end. And we're going to detail that in a moment. So stay with me. Good. First half. I hope you're still here. There's still more to come. And now this is change behavior. So change behavior is a specific thing that's not specific to PHP, but these are pieces of code that worked on PHP 8.2, for example, and that are still working in 8.3. The thing is, the result is probably not the same anymore. And I'm going to cover a good number of them. So that's actually very interesting in terms of change behavior. If you want to have the full list of them, I have collected them into a small encyclopedia of things that are changing. I currently have collected 114 of them since PHP, 7.2. But if you want to contribute, then the file is going to be available. So you can give it a try. Anyway, first thing, and I think everyone is going to be very happy to know that, Easterdate has been allowed from year 1970 to 2 billion. So if you have a need to use, Easterdate by year 2 billion, then rest assured that PHP has you back nowadays. This is fun, of course. The main important is that actually, until recently, it was limited to 2037. And for those of you who remembered the scare of PHP of 2000, then we are going to have the scare of 2037 in a moment. That's getting close to it. I mean, we're closer to 2037 than year 2000, and we're going to have the same problem. So at least on 64-bit systems, now this is limited. I do have to admit that I found this round year of 2 billion extremely suspicious. Why not go to PHP int max? I don't know. I mean, anyway, this is going to be good. The fun part with this kind of change behavior is that, well, what could it be actually? I mean, this is an extension of the validity of interval of validity, so it is much better than before. It probably means that in the current code, there are validations, checks that says, hey, don't give me a value that's beyond 2037, and then I will not spit out an error, meaning that those checks are probably going to be useless nowadays. You have to take a look at them. Now, Easterdate is not a very common function, so I am not sure if anything will be done for checking those. But yeah, we may have some more technical depth here because older versions were limited to something that was smaller. Anyway, that's also a good joke by itself. Another one that's interesting, and that was missed in PHP 8.2, is that visibility, constant visibility, was not checked in the classes. So if you remember in PHP 8.2, we had the introduction of visibility for constants inside the class, which meant that, of course, it protects which means that by default, a constant in an interface is public. But once you put this interface in a class, the class would not check if the constant is still public. So in 8.2, you could make the constant private. And now that we're in 8.3, this is not the case anymore. That was just something like a piece of check that was forgotten, and that now has to be, that is now compelling. So I would advise you to run these checks with linting in PHP or static analysis, and then you will be able to detect those beforehand, before the problem hits you in 8.3. I don't expect that to be too many, but again, we're looking at things that were bad before and that are getting better nowadays with PHP new versions. Another one that is introducing extra checks, and I put them here just more for the fun of it. PHP is now checking a lot better when you use array sum or array product, that the values that are put in this list of arguments are actually integers or something that you can use for multiplication and addition. Until now, PHP would just take everything and probably force juggle them into integers, and end up probably on the 0. So that would be safe. On the other hand, nowadays PHP will complain that it will not be able to handle anything with like an array or an object that cannot be turned into an int. Again, that means things that were possible before are going to at least yell at you and say that things are not possible. So hopefully this is just going to swell your logs, but just be warned about it. The other one that is funny, as you can see, for some reason, array pad would not allow the padding of an array more than a billion. It's technically a megabyte. I mean, this is 2 to the power 20, I think. And for some reason, that was a limitation. This has been limited. If you want to put a billion, or I would say 2 billions to is the date, that's still possible. But at least this has been removed. I mentioned range because range has changed its type. And as you can see, I've got half an hour just reading all the warnings and the changes. So it's probably going to be a bit boring for you to hear that. Most of them are checking that you're not trying to make a range from an array to an object, because of course that makes no sense. The more interesting part is the fact that the incoming values are not necessarily turned into an int if there is one of them. So in particular, if you give range 2 strings, it will not force them into int first, but it will use their ASCII number to be able to give you everything. In the current versions, that's not the case. Range will turn the second argument into an int, and that would lead to this strange result you see in the second row, which is that the range between 1 and z is 1 and 0, because the first one is obviously an int. The second one, being not an int, is turned into an int by PHP. Z is going to be turned into a 0, and then the range is wrong. On the other hand, in 8.3, you can see the 2 strings at the bottom. When the 2 arguments are strings, then there is no type juggling anymore, and PHP will indeed make the range between ASCII number 9 until ASCII number A, and then there is a bunch of punctuation. Which means that at the moment, if you're using range with strings, you might have surprise and get extra letters that appears out of nowhere. So just be careful. It's very difficult to spot those type dependent functions and see if they are doing anything correct, because you need to get the type, but you also need to get the value in it and make sure that everything is running as expected. So I don't think static analysis is going to help you, or it's just going to spit out so many combinations that it's going to be too much work to deal with. So if you're using range, just be careful. Otherwise, you can also switch to generators, yells, and stuff like that. And another one of those very arcane PHP features that everyone heard about, but no one ever, everyone has discussed about it, but no one has ever used, is the fact that we can actually increment strings. So if you put a hey on a string and you increment the string, you're gonna get a B, which makes sense. If you get a B, you get a Z. Once you reach a Z, then the plus plus will actually give you AA. So the string will kind of overflow and start being 2 different characters, and that will go on again like that. So this is famous. This is something that has been not used. It works on plus plus, doesn't work on minus minus. And when you think about it, it does only apply to, well, what? Spreadsheets. Yes. So the most vocal people who are getting robbed of PHP features that they do need is usually spreadsheet managers of any bird feathers. And to avoid that, PHP group has, at least prepared the future. Instead of removing that feature by itself, there are now two new functions called string increment and string decrement that are listed at the bottom of the slide, which mean that if you want this particular feature, instead of using that arcane way of doing things with ++, you can directly call the functions, and at least that's going to be obvious and readable. You can keep doing that. And at the moment, it is just a warning. It's not going to be removed until PHP 9, but you can, start moving to this new function. And then probably 9, it's going to be going away. The important here is to be more consistent between different ways of adding one. In particular, ++ or minus should be the equivalent to do $a + 1 or $a - 1. And at the moment, this is not the case. So I've listed here some of the values that you can ++. For example, if you add a Boolean, then the Boolean is just not even changed. If you had an error, an array, that's going to be, a type error because you can't increment an array. If you had a float, and that was a surprise to me, then literally the float will get 1. The string gets, a bump. Null, for some reason, is turned into an int. An object even themselves are a bit weird because most of the object will just stop and give a type error, but some of the object will actually do something. So yeah, that's what we want to clean at the moment. There are different ways of different things. You can take a look. The wiki is there. So for our friend who wanted to contribute, then you can read this first RFC that was written by Gina Banyard, and you can discuss with him if she wants to do how she wants to move on with that. But there's going to be some more cleaning. At the moment, this is a first step. Once it's been cleaned in the code, then it will be better. Getting close to the end, one feature that could be important in terms of security, unserialize. So I see. Oh yeah, I see a question here. So null will be int 1 or string. I don't know. I haven't. I only have discussed that as something that is weird. I think here the situation is null is turned into 0, and then 0 is turned into +1. But I don't know what will be the case. I would say that staying like that would be sane, but I don't know what could be done with that. I would say another possible avenue of evolution is that maybe we could have some magic methods that appear so that we could also handle that in our own yeah, our own object. So apparently there's new features coming up. I would say in the future, as soon as we have the rest of the feature saved. So now back on this one, unserialize. So unserialize is one of this format which is called closed. This is that feature of PHP that turns any piece of data that is running inside PHP into a string, which means that you can store it, for example, in a database, or you can ship it to across the web, and someone else will unserialize it. And when this unserialize is being analyzed, it will actually tell you that yes, it managed to extract something in it. Since it's a closed format, it means that inside the string, PHP what it needs. It will find the array of 0 elements, and then the last 2 bytes will be lost. And it does remind me of those security concerns we had when we were manipulating images in PHP. This was an important moment because, for example, GIF or PNG both are closed format, meaning that you can provide the whole image, and then after the image you can put some extra piece of code, and PHP will probably execute it just like the rest. And that's how you could inject, PHP infos into websites that would allow upload of images. Which means that at that point, we are back to the JSON's validate discussion. Shouldn't we have an unserialized validate that will allow us to spot those warnings before we execute them? And then we can do the unserialize and actually get the data. Or at the moment, well, the option is just unserialize and shut up the function by saying, okay, don't do anything with that. Hide the error warnings. Get class used to be yeah, validate is nice. Get class used to be able to tell you which class you are in, which is a double feature with either the magic constant called the class, or it could also be a specific, or you could also use the class operator on static or self to get the actual value. So at the moment, get class do not accept null anymore, and by default, it used to be telling you where you are, and now it's completely forbidden. It must be passed an object. So that's definitely a breaking change since PHP 8.2. Do use the classes. That's going to be anyway faster than calling a method. Another modernization is that SQLite is going to use only exceptions. At the moment, there are two modes. The default mode is that in case of error, the method would most probably return false, and then you cannot process it anymore. Nowadays, it's going to be always by exceptions, which means in particular that the enable exception method is now going to be deprecated and mentioning it. And that the rest also, just like we had for Easter, we're going to grow technical depth because there are currently checks on the result of query that go through the results. And now they're going to go through the try catch. So basically, to upgrade your code, remove all those ifs that are based on the result of the method. And then on the other hand, put a try catch around it to make sure that you catch it. Again, this is a warning at the moment, so you have to be ready for the future. But otherwise, there's nothing else to do. It still behaves correctly at the moment, but if you can start moving to exceptions, then you're going to be ready for the future. Class alias. Oh, okay. One of those obscure functions that's rarely used, but that apparently still exists and still has usage. Class alias allowed you to create aliases, application-wide aliases of classes. So you could give another name to a class than the one that was there, and both of them would still exist. So they would be identical. It's not removal of the previous one. It's a little bit like those use expressions, but there are two different catches. The first one is that class alias will work everywhere. So using it badly might damage some of your future use expressions because there's going to be a class conflict name. And the other one is when the fact that you are depending now on an execution. You have to go through class alias for the class to be existing. Beside that, the other upgrade we have here is that class alias supports native classes. So you can create another name for the native class of PHP, in particular if you don't want to use std class, but like standard class, so that we actually know what is this object. For example, that could be an upgrade. I know that we're going a little bit overboard, but I'm going to finish quickly. Array negatives. This one is another several iteration fix for PHP. Since 8.0, once you have set, if the biggest, sorry, let me try again. There are two systems to handle index in PHP. Either it's the automatic way, which assign an integer starting usually at 0 as the key, and then it will increment it all the time, or it will assign directly by giving the actual value. Now in 8.0, PHP was now able to detect that the array has started, assigning an integer, negative integer, and it will not skip the values until 0. But that was not the case if you started with an empty array. and now that specific problem has been fixed. I would say that you will be bitten by something there once you decide to mix direct access with an explicit index, and also do usage of the make usage of the into increment IDs. So if you're keeping one system or the other, probably going to be safe with that one. Static properties in traits used to be common across the whole family of classes. So you know that static properties are dedicated to the function they are, to the class they are. So they are declared in one class, and of course they are going to stay in that class because, well, as the name implies, a static property is a property dedicated to a class. The only thing that happened is that when you used a trait, then this static property suddenly was common to everyone in the family of classes. So in this example, the static property called P, because it's in a trait included in C, would actually be common to B and C. And that's how you end up with the script here that used to be, changing all the classes where whatever the class name you would be using, the property would be changed. So in 8.3, this has been changed, and the properties are, dedicated to the class they are injected in, so from the trait, and they will be a different container from the other classes. Meaning that, yeah, the properties are now distinct and they may not behave in unison. You need literally to explicitly access them to be able to access. Random improvement. Oh, this one is just going to be fun. There is a random extension in PHP, and this one got some extra methods. So I just couldn't, I couldn't avoid the jokes about it. The last one that is actually very important is some protection against Stack Overflow. So PHP use a stack to know how deep you are inside the coding methods inside methods. That is good. And so far, this was not protected against Stack Overflow. So there is a limited amount of calls you can do in PHP. And nowadays, we have a dedicated directive in PHP that allow you not to grow that beyond that size. And instead of doing a segmentation fault, you will actually stop and get an error. So, well, I don't know if I can share that, of course, but the little piece of script you have there is doing a segmentation fault in PHP 8.2. Because anytime you create an object X, you say that by default, the property is going to be another object X, meaning that the constructor is calling itself ad nauseam, and then it does segfault. And now in 8.3, it does not segfault at all. So that's good. That's a good stability that would be useful for us later. And that's it. So 8.4 is going to be next year, and you have to consider that in 2025 we get 8.5 or 9, but that will be the 30th anniversary of PHP. So hopefully we actually get version 9. We'll also be lacking LFPent in the meantime, so that's going to be important to upgrade. But get ready for the next versions, and we'll see you next year for more. Thank you very much.
Damien, I think we've got a question.
I'm reading that. Okay, so the question is that PHP is mostly acting on the web development backend, and the question is, is it prone to move to other spaces? PHP nowadays is labeling itself more like a generalist scripting language more than the web. It does dominate head and shoulder on the web, so that's still the case. On the desktop and on the command line, there are definitely some efforts being done. There's also a lot of efforts to have more interactions with other technologies. I recently compiled myself a piece of Rust that I can interface directly with PHP. So it means that you don't have to wait for things to be done in PHP by itself. You can rely on other technologies to do something that existing. I'm not aware of anything in the mobile in particular, but desktop is one of them. And with the harmonization and the fact that PHP is getting more homogeneous, yeah, I think in the future we'll be able to do more things with PHP and conquer other places. Now it's always a very changing environment. So I can't really tell where it's going. Also, I understand that a lot of those services, for example, you don't have to make those big machine learning models available from PHP. You just use an API and then you connect to it and have it done there. So that's probably sufficient for what we want to do at that point. And I see another question. Garbage collection, has it improved? Still has the reputation for memory leaks, so you can have long-running processor there. So no, I haven't mentioned that here. Generally speaking, it's getting better in terms of management. So I would say this is probably an update for the previous PHP versions, 8.1 or 8.2, where efforts have been made in this realm. I also think that this limitation on the stack flow is part of it, but no, PHP has improved there. I can't really quantify that, nor that I've heard any problems recently, so it's too good. I know that for static analysis, mine may easily turn 2 or 3 hours before ending up there, and being done, and I still manage to control the amount of energy there. I can also mention that PHP introduced these weak maps, if you ever heard about them, which are pieces of data that you allow the engine to get rid of, meaning that you can use them as a cache, meaning that if they are here, you can use them. If they're not here, you're going to fill them. And that's now integrated inside PHP, which is a good way to keep some information while not always keeping them in the memory. So I hope that's answering your question. But at least this is not in PHP 8.3. There's no specific work on the memory leaks here.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Damien, for that really interesting, insightful presentation. What we'll do after this is we'll leave the link on for half an hour or so, just in case anyone wants to have a bit more of an open discussion forum to talk about PHP market and everything. So we'll hand it over to you, Damien, but we'll leave the link live for now. But again, thank you so much for coming on and giving us all the insights on 8.3. Really exciting times.